former Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta reportedly intervened to save Margaret Nduta, a Kenyan woman who was facing execution in Vietnam for drug trafficking. Reports indicate that Uhuru made a direct call to the Vietnamese president, appealing for clemency in Nduta's case. Margaret Nduta was arrested in July 2023 at Tan Son International Airport in Ho Chi Minh City, after authorities found over 2 kilograms of cocaine in her luggage. She was later convicted and sentenced to death on March 6, 2025, despite her defense that she was unaware of the suitcase's contents and was only transporting it for a payment of $1,300. The court upheld the strict drug laws of Vietnam. As her execution date approached, Kenya intensified diplomatic efforts to save her. The government, through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, formally reached out to Vietnam, appealing for clemency. Kenyan legislators also called on President William Ruto to intervene. Uhuru Kenyatta's intervention reportedly came at a critical moment. Sources indicate that he reached out directly to the Vietnamese president, making a personal appeal for Nduta's life. His experience in international diplomacy and past engagements with global leaders may have played a role in facilitating the discussion. Vietnam is known for its strict drug policies, where trafficking over 600 grams of heroin or cocaine can result in the death penalty. Despite this, international appeals have in some cases led to commutations or pardons. Uhuru's diplomatic move was seen as a significant effort to secure such an outcome for Nduta. Following the intervention, sources close to the matter indicated that Vietnamese authorities were reviewing the case. The Kenyan government remained optimistic that the execution could be halted. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs continued to monitor the situation closely. Back in Kenya, Nduta's family and human rights organizations welcomed the news of Uhuru's efforts. Many Kenyans took to social media, expressing hope that she would be spared and given a second chance. Some questioned how she ended up in such a situation, while others urged the government to do more to protect Kenyan citizens abroad. This case also shed light on the increasing number of Kenyans caught in drug trafficking scandals overseas. Authorities have warned citizens against being used as drug couriers by international cartels, which often exploit desperate job seekers with promises of quick money. Kenya has in the past intervened in similar cases, though not all have been successful. The government has been pushing for prisoner exchange agreements to allow convicted Kenyans to serve their sentences back home instead of facing harsh penalties abroad. As diplomatic efforts continued, attention shifted to whether Vietnam would respond favorably to Kenya's request. International pressure also mounted, with human rights activists calling for a review of death penalty cases involving foreign nationals. Margaret Nduta's case highlighted the dangers of international drug trafficking and the severe consequences in countries with strict anti-drug laws. While she maintained her innocence, the legal system in Vietnam showed little leniency toward drug-related offenses. Uhuru's involvement in the case was seen as a rare but powerful move, demonstrating how personal diplomacy could influence international justice matters. His direct communication with the Vietnamese leadership brought new hope to those advocating for Nduta's release. With only hours before the scheduled execution, the Kenyan government and its diplomatic team worked tirelessly to secure a favorable outcome. Reports suggested that negotiations were ongoing, and the final decision rested with Vietnam's leadership. If successful, Uhuru's intervention would be seen as a major diplomatic victory for Kenya. However, if the appeal failed, it would raise further concerns about the effectiveness of such efforts in death penalty cases abroad. The outcome of the case would likely have long-term implications for Kenya-Vietnam relations and how both countries handle similar cases in the future. It also underscored the need for stronger legal assistance and protection for Kenyans. working or traveling abroad. As Kenyans awaited news, emotions ran high, with many hoping that Nduta would be spared from execution. The case served as a reminder of the risks involved in international travel and the importance of vigilance when dealing with unfamiliar opportunities. In the end, the fate of Margaret Nduta lay in the hands of Vietnamese authorities. Whether Uhuru's intervention would change the course of events remained to be seen. The world watched closely, awaiting the final decision. Kenyan diplomats in Hanoi continued engaging with Vietnamese officials, emphasizing the need for clemency and a possible reconsideration of the ruling. They reiterated that Nduta may have been a victim of drug trafficking syndicates that exploit unsuspecting travelers. Vietnamese authorities, however, maintained that their country has a zero-tolerance policy for drug-related crimes. The government argued that strict enforcement of the law was necessary to curb the growing threat of drug trafficking in the region. Despite the firm stance, Kenya's legal team sought alternative legal avenues, including appealing for a presidential pardon. Such clemency measures had been granted in the past, but only in rare and exceptional cases. Meanwhile, human rights groups across Africa and Asia called for a review of Vietnam's harsh sentencing policies. They argued that many foreign nationals convicted of drug trafficking often had limited knowledge of the legal systems in the countries where they were arrested. The case also reignited discussions on the need for Kenya to enhance legal education and support for its citizens traveling abroad. Lawmakers suggested that the government should establish stronger consular assistance to help Kenyans facing legal trouble in foreign countries. As negotiations continued, Margaret Nduta's family remained hopeful. They appealed to the Kenyan government to do everything possible to secure her release or at least have her sentence commuted to life imprisonment. Back in Vietnam, international media picked up on the case, putting further pressure on the government. Some reports compared Nduta's case to similar incidents where foreign nationals were executed. Despite global appeals for clemency, the international attention also raised concerns about the role of organized crime in luring unsuspecting individuals into smuggling drugs. Experts warned that criminal syndicates often use economic hardship as a means to recruit people into illegal activities. Kenyan law enforcement agencies responded to the case by launching investigations into possible recruiters operating within the country. Authorities aimed to dismantle networks involved in smuggling drugs through Kenyan citizens. As the deadline for execution approached, speculation grew over whether Vietnam would bow to diplomatic and humanitarian appeals. The Kenyan government continued to emphasize that execution should be a last resort, especially in cases involving first-time offenders. The Kenyan diaspora community also joined the campaign, urging their government to push harder for Nduta's release. They called for a broader strategy to prevent similar situations in the future, including raising awareness about the dangers of drug trafficking. Diplomatic insiders revealed that Vietnam's leadership was under internal pressure as well. While maintaining a tough stance on drugs, they were aware of the growing international attention on the case and the possible diplomatic implications of proceeding with the execution. Some Kenyan leaders suggested that future bilateral agreements between the two nations should include provisions for prisoner exchanges. This would allow Kenyan citizens convicted abroad to serve their sentences back home rather than face extreme penalties. As discussions continued, Nduta was reportedly moved to a high-security detention facility, where she awaited the final decision. Her legal team hoped that the temporary stay on her execution could provide enough time for further negotiations. Meanwhile, political analysts debated the significance of Uhuru Kenyatta's involvement in the case. Some saw it as a bold and strategic move, while others questioned whether his influence could truly sway Vietnam's justice system. The Kenyan public remained divided on the issue. While many sympathized with Nduta's situation, others believed that drug trafficking should be met with strict punishment to deter others from engaging in similar activities. Vietnamese officials, in a late-night statement, confirmed that they were still considering Kenya's request. This indicated that diplomatic efforts had at least delayed the execution, giving Nduta a glimmer of hope. As the world watched, the final decision on Margaret Nduta's fate rested on Vietnam's top leadership. Whether the combination of diplomatic pressure, humanitarian appeals, and Uhuru Kenyatta's intervention would be enough to save her life remained uncertain.